if you've ever been called the bright one in your family, you know it's not a compliment, it's a lifelong performance contract you didn't sign. In my case, it meant being the Carter family's golden ticket. Not golden child, that was reserved for my younger brother Travis, who once ate glue on a dare and was rewarded with applause for being fearless. No, I was the ticket. The investment. The future lawyer, judge, maybe even senator, if my mom's wine nights got tipsy enough. For 18 years, I tried to live up to it. I got the grades. I joined every club with a Latin motto. I skipped parties to edit debate scripts and took extra credit just for fun, which, looking back, should have been my first red flag. My parents, Ed and Karen Carter, suburban royalty, told everyone I was Harvard-bound before I'd even hit puberty. I ended up at Columbia Law. Close enough for the Christmas card, but not the fridge. Still, they were proud. Proud in that tense, transactional way, like a couple admiring the stock they'd invested in but couldn't wait to flip for profit. My dad even used to joke, "Once you're in the courtroom, we'll finally have someone in the family who wins arguments." At first, I laughed. Later, I realized I wasn't supposed to win arguments. I was supposed to validate theirs. Law school hit like a freight train. My first semester felt like drowning in Latin while being judged for your posture. Everyone was competing, but no one knew the rules. I couldn't sleep. I lost 10 pounds in 2 months. My jaw clenched so tight I chipped a molar during finals week. Still, I kept going. Because quitting meant disappointing the investors. Until one day, halfway through second year, I sat in a property law lecture and realized I'd rather set my own hair on fire than draft one more contract about easements. I texted my mom. "Can we talk later tonight? Important." She replied in 0.2 seconds. About grades? That was the problem. It never occurred to her it might be about me. That night I told them the truth. I was dropping out. I was burnt out. Depressed. I didn't want to practice law. I never did. I wanted to figure out who I was outside of syllabi and career paths curated since childhood. Their response? Let's just say my dad didn't disappoint with his delivery. "You're a waste of potential," he said flatly. No anger. Just disappointment so dense you could cut it with a gavel. My mom followed up with, "If you walk away from this, don't expect us to pick up the pieces." I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just nodded. I think that's what bothered them most, that I didn't fight to stay in their good graces. I left their house that night with nothing but a duffel bag, a cracked phone, and a head full of shame that stuck to my bones like fog on glass. They didn't speak to me for nearly 4 years after that. The first year was brutal. I worked in a bookstore, then a copy shop. Lived in a studio apartment so small the oven doubled as a sock dryer. Therapy was a luxury I couldn't afford, so I journaled until my wrists ached and rewatched Legally Blonde on loop. Ironic, I know. I didn't even know what I was rebuilding toward. I just knew I wanted a life that felt like mine. And somewhere along the line, between surviving off Costco trail mix and writing freelance contracts for small businesses, I found a rhythm. I started helping local vendors navigate tricky lease renewals. Wrote a blog about basic legal rights in plain English. Answered DMs from frantic Etsy sellers who didn't understand sales tax. Slowly, I became the person people called when they needed to untangle legal spaghetti, just without the courtroom, the robe, or the existential dread. Eventually, I went back, not to law school, but to a smaller, more flexible JD program in state. This time on my own terms. I graduated with a specialization in small business law, passed the bar, and opened my own practice out of a converted shed behind a coffee shop. Not glamorous. But it had a skylight. And it was mine. I even made business cards. Simple. Clean. Just my name. J. Carter Yesq. And a tiny gavel in the corner because I was finally ready to own the thing I used to run from. That should have been the end of the story, right? But fate, or karma with a clipboard, had one more plot twist in store. One Tuesday morning, I got a call from an unknown number. The voice on the other end? My mother's. It was her voice. Sharp, clipped, and trying to sound calm, like someone holding a champagne flute while the ship sinks behind them. "Jackson," she said, as if my name tasted like pennies. "I need to speak with you. Urgently." I didn't respond at first. Just listened. The line buzzed with silence, the kind you only hear from someone who doesn't know how to ask for help without making it sound like a favor to you. She finally said, "We're in some legal trouble." And I swear I could hear the universe chuckle. Apparently my father, the same man who said I'd never survive outside a classroom, had entered into a joint venture with some innovative entrepreneur from church. Translation: a guy with a podcast and 3 bankruptcy filings. They'd invested in a luxury RV campground concept that was supposed to merge the great outdoors with remote working opportunities. Because, of course, they had. Long story short, it was a scam. A classic Ponzi setup dressed in Wi-Fi towers and artificial turf. And now, Dad and a handful of other investors were being named in a civil suit for damages, misrepresentation, and violating state investment laws. "You're a lawyer now, aren't you?" my mom said, like she was asking if I still knew how to tie my shoes. "I am," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "Passed the bar last year. Opened my own practice." "That's wonderful," she said, but the words sounded brittle. "We need you to help us." I blinked, standing in the kitchenette of my tiny office, holding a half-stale bagel. The same people who once told me I was a disappointment in a hoodie were now asking me to save them from a financial hole they happily dove into. "Are you offering to pay?" I asked bluntly. "We're family," she replied, as if that meant I took legal tender in hugs and emotional trauma. "That's not a no." She didn't respond. I told her I'd think about it, which wasn't a lie. I genuinely needed time to decide whether I was ready to swim through a pool of old bitterness just to maybe toss them a life preserver. The next day, I got a manila envelope at the office. No return address. Inside was a letter from their family accountant, more like my dad's golfing buddy, outlining the situation, and stapled to it a note. In my dad's handwriting. "Maybe you're not such a waste of potential after all." No apology. No acknowledgement of the years of silence. Just a begrudging admission wrapped in sarcasm and ego. But weirdly enough, I didn't feel angry. I felt steady. Because in that moment, it hit me, they hadn't changed. I had. I sat on it for a week. Went to work. Helped clients. Reviewed contracts for a florist being harassed by her ex-landlord. Helped a welder negotiate a fair lease for his new shop. These were my people now, folks who paid invoices on time and thanked you with banana bread. But that old part of me, the version who still wanted to hear, "I'm proud of you," without conditions, he stirred. And that's when the idea hit me. Not revenge. Not even justice. Just clarity. I took one of my business cards, thick stock, embossed lettering, subtle navy trim, and I wrote 3 words on the back with a Sharpie. "Still wasted? J." Slipped it into a plain white envelope and mailed it to the address they'd included. No cover letter. No explanation. Just a card. 2 days later, I got a call from an unknown number. I didn't pick up. Then came the voicemail. "Jackson, I saw what you sent." Pause. Breath. That was unnecessary. Longer pause. But accurate. Click. No apology. No thanks. But something raw in her voice. Something I didn't recognize. Humility? Maybe. Or just the beginning of it. The next day, my assistant, Joe, a sarcastic genius with 3 nose rings and a spreadsheet addiction, walked into my office holding a bouquet of carnations and a confused expression. "You expecting flowers from someone named Ed?" she asked. I blinked. "My dad's name." She raised an eyebrow. "Well, he has terrible taste in flowers. Also, the card just says we should talk. No love, no thanks. Just vibes." I laughed for the first time that day. Because even now, even after all this, my father still couldn't just say what needed to be said. But I could. And the answer was, not yet. Not until they understood what they really threw away. Not until they stopped treating me like a backup plan that somehow survived the fire. So I tossed the card in the trash. Kept the flowers. Joe put them in the bathroom, said they matched the soap. I didn't hear from them for another week. And honestly, I didn't expect to. The Carters didn't believe in chasing people. They believed in waiting long enough for you to crawl back on your own, preferably with an apology gift basket and a revised life plan. But then my dad emailed me. Subject line: Reconnecting. No greeting. No punctuation. Just, we could really use a meeting. Strictly professional. Would prefer if you didn't bring up the past. Followed by a PDF attachment titled Investment Dispute Notes. Not even a sincerely. Just a man who still believed formality outranked humility. Joe read the email over my shoulder and snorted. Strictly professional? From the man who once asked if you were legally allowed to be a disappointment? I sighed. He did follow that up with a reminder that therapy's not real medicine. Charming! We debated it for an hour. Joe made a pros and cons list. The pro column had things like potential closure and moral high ground. The con column just said trauma. Eventually, curiosity won out. I replied with 3 words. I'll hear you. We met at a coffee shop halfway between my office and their suburban fortress. I picked the place, small, quiet, no risk of running into mutual acquaintances who still thought I was off backpacking in Europe to find myself. I showed up in a blazer. Not because I wanted to impress them, but because I knew my dad respected pressed shoulders more than open hearts. They were already seated. My mom wore pearls, like this was a church fundraiser. My dad wore a button-up 2 sizes too tight, like he still hadn't accepted that time moves forward. They looked older than I remembered. Smaller. Like someone had turned down the contrast on them over time. Jackson, my mother said, standing like it was instinct, not desire. You look well. I nodded. I am. We sat. No hugs. No small talk. Just coffee, silence, and the thrum of everything we weren't saying. Then Dad slid a manila folder across the table like a mob boss. Inside were typed pages, printed emails, and one particularly sad pie chart titled Investor Loss Projection Adjusted. It's complicated, he said. But we're being unfairly dragged into something we didn't orchestrate. I skimmed the folder. Scanned the details. And something clicked, a clause buried in their original agreement that contradicted everything they thought they'd signed. You didn't read this, I said flatly. My dad blinked. Of course I did. No, I said, tapping the page. This line here? It voids the arbitration clause the minute a secondary investment partner fails to disclose prior legal proceedings. Which your podcast friend did not disclose. Mom squinted at it like it was ancient Greek. So what does that mean? It means, I said slowly, you're not liable for nearly as much as you think. But you will be, if you keep signing things without reading. They stared at me. Not in awe. Not even in gratitude. Just surprise. As if this was the first time they'd actually seen me function. My mom leaned in. Jackson, thank you? I raised my eyebrow. She looked at my dad. He looked back, then finally muttered, We appreciate your help. There it was. Not an apology. But the Carter family's version of bowing. I'll email you a retainer agreement, I said, standing. And my rates. Their faces twitched. My mom's mouth opened, probably to say something like, We assumed this would be pro bono. But I didn't give her the chance. I'm running a business, I said. And this? This is work. Then I walked out, letting the door chime behind me like punctuation. The first invoice I sent them was paid, late. Not enough to raise alarms, but enough to remind me who I was dealing with. They paid in 2 separate transfers, one from my dad's business account, one from my mom's backup fund, and included a note that said, We're a little tight right now. I didn't reply. Just logged it in the system, marked it cleared, and moved on. Professional. Strictly professional. That was the rule I gave myself. Because the second I let emotion in, even a teaspoon of bitterness, it would flood the whole foundation. so I treated them like any other client. Scheduled calls. Sent summaries. Explained terms like I was talking to people who didn't once mock me for asking too many questions. And in return, they were awkward, polite, distant. Like I was some estranged family friend who knew a little too much about their bad decisions. Joe, of course, loved every second of it. "Do they call you Jackson or just counselor now?" she asked one afternoon while eating the lunch she swore was plant-based, but smelled aggressively like bacon. "They haven't called me anything directly. They mostly just say, per your note or as discussed." She grinned. "Your family's so emotionally constipated, they make spreadsheets feel heartfelt." Not wrong. Still, I couldn't lie, there was something darkly satisfying about it all. They had cut me out for failing the plan, and now they were completely dependent on my ability to navigate a legal mess they helped create. Every Zoom meeting, every confused text message about deadlines or "what's a deposition again?" was a small reminder that the kid they dismissed had quietly become the adult they needed. But the real curveball came 3 weeks later. I was in my office, mid-call with a guy trying to trademark a taco-themed board game, don't ask, when Joe buzzed in. "You have a walk-in," she said. "And you're gonna want to take this one." "Why?" "Because he's wearing a suit that screams midlife crisis, and he's asking if you do family law." I sighed, wrapped the call, and stepped out. And there he was. Travis. My brother. Still handsome in that. Coached high school soccer for 3 years, now sells real estate and motivational candles. Kind of way. He gave me a crooked smile. "Hey, bro." I blinked. "That's bold." He shrugged. "Figured I'd try it out. Been a while." 5 years, I said. "Give or take." He looked around. "Nice setup. Didn't think you'd end up in a law office, to be honest." I tilted my head. "Did you think I'd end up at all?" He had the decency to flinch. "Can we talk?" he asked. I led him into the conference room. Closed the door. Sat across from him like he was a deposition I didn't trust yet. And then, shock of the century, he got to the point. "I'm getting divorced," he said. "And I need help." I didn't speak. Just stared. He looked down. "She wants full custody. I'm not fighting that. I just want fair visitation. And to keep my dog." "The one you named after Elon Musk?" His ears turned pink. "That was a phase. And you came to me. Why?" "Because I know you're good. And because no one else in the family knows what they're doing." He looked up. "I know I was the favorite. I know I laughed at the jokes. I didn't defend you, and I should have. But I didn't come here for forgiveness. I came because I'm scared. And I trust you." For a moment, I didn't see the smug golden boy who coasted on charm and second chances. I saw my brother. Panicking. Flawed. Human. And maybe, just maybe, trying. So I opened my drawer. Pulled out a form. "I'll need your full financials. And no dog jokes in the deposition." He blinked. "You'll help?" I nodded. "As your lawyer. Not your brother. For now." Travis wasn't the only one who came crawling back. A week after I filed the preliminary custody paperwork for him, I got another email from my parents. This one longer, more polite, and surprisingly desperate. Subject: additional matter urgent. Apparently, a local journalist had caught wind of the RV debacle. Nothing dramatic, just a regional column titled, "Campground Collapse Leaves Investors in the Dust." But in it, my dad's name was mentioned. Once. That was enough to send him into a tailspin. His legacy, as he called it in the email, was being threatened by speculative reporting. I read the phrase 3 times before deciding I'd rather eat a stapler than let him run PR damage control on his own. I replied, "We'll add a cease and desist request to the action plan. You'll need to be transparent with me about everything. No surprises." His response came within 15 minutes. "Thank you, Jackson. We trust your judgment." I stared at the words. Trust. It tasted weird coming from them. Like drinking orange juice after brushing your teeth. But hey, growth is growth, even if it's awkward and citrusy. Meanwhile, Travis kept showing up. He brought folders. He brought snacks. He even brought coffee, although he somehow still managed to forget my order half the time and default to whatever sounded intellectual. The weirdest part? We talked. Not just about the case, but about life. His failed startup. His daughter. How he sometimes felt like he had to perform at family dinners just to keep the spotlight. I told him about my tiny apartment phase, my blog, the client who once paid me in hand-knitted socks. He laughed. A real laugh. And at one point he said, "You know, you're kinda terrifying when you're in lawyer mode." Terrifying how? Like, if I ever scammed someone, you'd bury me in paperwork so thick I'd beg for prison. I grinned. I take that as a compliment. I meant it as one. It was bizarre. For the first time since we were kids playing fake court with Legos and a shoebox gavel, we weren't competing. We were existing. Level ground. No parents narrating over our shoulders. Of course, that peace couldn't last long. Not in the Carter universe. It happened during a scheduled mediation for the investor case. We were reviewing settlement options in my conference room. Mom, Dad, their accountant, aka Chad with the spreadsheets, and me, when my father decided to improvise. "Well, we've made an offer, but we also have leverage," he announced confidently. My eyes snapped up from the draft agreement. "What leverage?" He leaned back, laced his fingers behind his head like a man in a detergent commercial, and said, "I kept emails. From the guy running the campground. If we leak those to the press, it'll ruin him." I blinked. "Dad, that's not leverage. That's potential blackmail." He paused. "Are you sure?" Joe, from the hallway, let out an audible snort. "Yes," I said. "Very sure. Please don't say that in a room with your lawyer ever again." Mom shifted in her seat, clearly flustered. "We just thought it might help." "What would help?" I said. "Is following the strategy one already laid out and not creating new legal problems during your legal consultation." They both shut up after that. For a full 10 minutes. Then my dad said something I didn't expect. "Jackson, you're good at this." I looked up. He was serious. "You're really good. Not just in a we're proud way. I mean in a you-know-what-you're-doing way." I didn't reply right away. Because part of me, the kid who once cried in a dorm bathroom over a failed mock trial, wanted to melt. And the other part, the adult who'd been ghosted for years, wanted to slam the folder shut and walk out. Instead, I just nodded. "Thanks," I said. "Now let's avoid any more felonies, shall we?" 2 weeks later, the settlement came through. We didn't win, not in the press conference and champagne way my dad probably dreamed of, but we closed the case without any criminal charges, and their financial liability was reduced by almost 70%. For once, my parents followed instructions. No backdoor negotiations. No rogue phone calls to see what they could personally work out. Just trust. Muted, uncomfortable trust. After the final paperwork was filed, I sent the closing invoice. Paid same day. No notes. No emojis. Just a clean wire transfer and a very formal email signed, "Best regards, Edward Carter." Joe threw confetti in the break room. That Friday, I stayed late to finish up Travis's case notes. He and I had developed an odd rhythm. We'd text during off hours, mostly memes and sarcastic lawyer jokes, but sometimes real stuff. Like how scared he was to see his daughter only on weekends. Or how grateful he was that I didn't hold the past against him, even though he knew I had every right to. At one point he messaged, "You ever think about talking to Mom and Dad? Like, actually talking?" I stared at the screen for a while before replying. "They don't know how. And I don't need it anymore." Which was mostly true. But there was still a part of me, the old, frayed, insecure part, that sometimes wanted the moment. The Hallmark scene. The tearful, "We were wrong about you." Instead, I got this. The next morning, I opened the mail at my apartment and found an envelope from my mom. Inside wasn't a letter, it was a check. Not huge. Not insulting. Just clean. Enough to say, "Thank you." without saying it. And tucked in behind it? One of my old childhood photos. Me, age 8, in a Halloween costume, tiny briefcase, glasses, suit 2 sizes too big. On the back, she'd written in small, neat script, "Guess you really were meant for it after all." Mom. No apology. No mention of disowning me. Just a snapshot of who they used to believe I was, and I suppose, a quiet nod that maybe I'd found my way back there. On my own terms. I didn't cry. Okay, I did. But just a little. And Joe wasn't there to witness it, so it doesn't count. The weekend after the case closed, Travis and I got drinks. No suits. No folders. Just brothers, one divorced, one emotionally unevicted, drinking overpriced IPAs and watching a trivia night spiral into chaos after someone swore Mercury was a planet. Only in theory. You ever think things turned out kinda poetic? Travis asked. I shrugged. You mean them needing the son they disowned? He grinned. Yeah. That. Very HBO drama arc. More like off-brand Netflix, I said. Low budget. Terrible pacing. We both laughed. Then he added, I think they really respect you now. I sipped my drink. They respect what I became. I don't think they've made peace with how I got there. He nodded. Fair. We sat in silence for a minute. Then he clinked his glass to mine. To the waste of potential. I raised an eyebrow. To the lawyer with a shoebox office, a sarcastic assistant, and more spine than all of us combined. I smirked. To the brother who finally got it. He smiled. Still wasted? I grinned. Not even close. It would have been easy to let the story end there. Clean resolution. Court case closed. Family semi-functional. But life has a way of testing whether you're really over something, or just emotionally bubble-wrapped until the next hit. That hit came 2 weeks later. I was in the middle of drafting a licensing agreement for a guy who sold designer terrariums shaped like 80s arcade games, niche, but shockingly lucrative, when I got a call from Joe. Not a buzz. Not a Slack ping. A real call. That never happened unless something was on fire, figuratively or literally. You need to get out here, she said. Now. I opened the door to find my parents. In my waiting room. Holding a bottle of wine and a bakery box, like they'd Googled. What do humans bring when seeking forgiveness? They stood up awkwardly when they saw me, like teenagers caught sneaking out. Jackson, my mom said, voice light but trembling. We thought we'd stop by. Just to say thank you. In person. Joe looked like she was about to pop popcorn in the corner. I stepped aside. Come in. They followed me into the conference room, a place that, until recently, only held depositions and awkward silences. Today, it felt like a stage. They sat. I didn't. Mom placed the bakery box in front of her like it was a shield. It's lemon bars. Your favorite. They were, I said evenly. In middle school. She winced. Dad cleared his throat. Look, we won't take up much of your time. We realized we never really acknowledged everything. What we said. What we didn't say. I folded my arms. We were wrong, he said. 4 words. Simple. Heavy. Mom added, you weren't a waste. You were finding yourself. We just didn't want to admit we didn't know who you were anymore. That one hit. Because it was probably the most honest thing she'd ever said to me. And now? I asked. She looked down. Now we're trying to get to know you. Not the version we invented. Dad leaned forward. We're not asking for everything to go back to how it was. Just a start. Dinners, maybe? Coffee. We can learn. I studied them. Not their clothes. Not their faces. Their posture. Their intent. This wasn't manipulation. This was fear. Fear that their relationship with me had a statute of limitations. I walked to my desk. Picked up one of my business cards. Same embossed lettering. Same quiet gavel in the corner. I flipped it over and wrote one word. Maybe. Slid it across the table. Dad picked it up. Read it. Nodded. Mom smiled, And I saw it, the same smile she wore in every childhood photo, just softer now. Older. Less certain. They left without saying more. Jo poked her head in. So, lemon bars? I shrugged. Leave them in the kitchen. Travis will probably eat 5 and call it self-care. She smirked. And you? I leaned against the wall. I think I'm done needing an apology to feel whole. Jo tilted her head. You sure? I smiled. Not even close. The next Monday, I found myself walking past the mirror in my office and pausing. Not because I looked different. Not really. Same blazer. Same tired eyes. Same stubborn colic in the back of my head no product could ever tame. But something felt different. I looked like someone who wasn't waiting anymore. Not for approval. Not for recognition. Not for some overdue moment when the people who once raised me would finally understand who I was. Because I did. And honestly, that was enough. I didn't rush to accept their invitation. I let a few weeks pass. Focused on my real clients, the ones who paid on time, respected boundaries, and never once called my potential wasted. Jo kept teasing me. You gonna say yes to family dinner or make them draft a formal invite on letterhead? Don't tempt me, I said. I've got templates. In the meantime, Travis and I kept in touch. His custody hearing went well. He got a weekend arrangement and, more importantly, the dog. He sent me a photo of him, his daughter, and the corgi in a backyard with a kiddie pool. The caption said, "The Dream Team. Including Mark Zuckerberg." I shook my head and laughed in my office. Out loud. Alone. No shame. Then, one quiet Thursday afternoon, an email landed in my inbox. Subject, referral request. It was from my mother. She'd passed my name along to a friend, another investor burned in a similar deal, and wanted to give them a trusted recommendation. No small talk. No guilt trip. Just business. But at the bottom of the email, she added, I told them you're the best lawyer I know. I meant it. For a woman who once told me I made bad decisions look deliberate. It hit hard. But I didn't reply right away. Instead, I took a card from my desk drawer. The same one I'd sent them months ago. I flipped it over. Wrote in the corner, "Still wasted?" Then added, just underneath, "Didn't think so." I tucked it into my wallet. Not to send. Just to keep. A reminder that I didn't need anyone else's signature to validate my own story. I was the lawyer they called when things fell apart. I was the man who built something steady from scratch. And if being a waste of potential meant choosing peace over pressure, clarity over legacy, and purpose over performance, well, then maybe we should all be so lucky.